Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome back to the Just Interesting podcast, episode 159. Guys, a lot has happened since we last did one of these.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. A lot has happened. Donald Trump is president again.
That's the biggest one, yeah.
Elon Musk is now vice president, essentially.
At least VP.
At least
he might
VP.
actually be POTUS. Who knows?
But it's because of that I think, for unrelated reasons, it would be a fantastic idea to discuss, could we live on Mars? You know, just hypothetically. What would be the challenges? What would humans have to go through? What would need to be the technological advances we would have to undergo in order to successfully move to and colonize and live on Mars? And that is the topic that we're going to be discussing today.
Is it even worth it?
Well, I guess that's a question we can go into. Is it worth it in the end?
Is it worth the risk?
You heard it here first, folks. By the end of this episode, we will have resolved whether or not it is worth going to Mars to live as humans. And whether you should bother trying to go into all that astronaut training and applying for the special programs to get there first.
Well,
tell us.
Well, if they need podcasters on Mars, then they've got our numbers. That's for sure. But
imagine the Mars influencers trying to get people to move.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah. You guys, you're jumping the gun. This is later on in the episode where we're going to be discussing all things Mars in the future. But before that, how have you both been? It's been ages since I've seen you both. How are you doing? How are you, Martin? What's been going on?
What has been going on? I mean, it's a good question because I'm trying to think back to it's been cold. It's been cold, very cold.
Have you guys cracked into the mince pies yet? Have you started on the Christmas goods?
Oh yeah, I started in late October.
Kind of. I haven't actually opened a mince pie packet yet, but my wife, my wonderful wife, who's a fantastic baker, made a sponge cake out of mince pies left over from last Christmas. So we had a mince pie sponge cake.
That's a bit rogue, isn't it? How are they still good from last? Are they still good from last Christmas?
Well, when you bake them into a
more importantly,
they're surprisingly good.
How did they not get eaten over the course of an entire year? Is what I'm wondering.
Entirely my fault. As in, I think I reserved them as my special supply of mince pies.
My June mince pies.
No. As in, like this packet is for me because everyone else eats them, and this one's for me. Yeah. So it was kind of no-go zone, and then I just didn't eat them. You're
like a squirrel. You bury your nuts. You bury your nuts in the garden, and then you forget where you buried them. You just hoarded all the mince pies, and then didn't eat them all year.
So have you tried this mince pie cake yet?
Oh, I've eaten the whole thing. It's bloody delicious.
Oh wow! And you're fine. You know, no issues.
It's been. Good. You know, my eye is not twitching anymore. It's fine.
Mince pies. They don't last that long, do they? Surely.
So this is why I turned it into a cake. Boldly ate one of them in a kind of desperate moment of I need a sugar fix. It was not good.
So you put it's still.
Well, the filling's fine because it's like preserved with alcohol and the pastry. So she mashed them up, made a kind of biscuity base. I've completely derailed the podcast now. Sorry.
No, this is more interesting than anything that we're going to be talking about this evening.
She took the mince pies from the packet, mushed them all up into a kind of base, and then put a sponge on top.
Sounds very TikTok.
Put sponge mix. So you had kind of like a 4-inch layer of sponge on top of the layer of mince, and all the biscuits sank to the bottom. So it was a really nice kind of almost like a sponge trifle effect. It was delicious, absolutely delicious, especially when served warm with some ice cream.
Well, that does sound nice. I mean, I think it's the same question that we're asking about Mars. Is it worth the risk?
Brought it back around. Elegant.
Thank you, you saved maybe £1.50, but you could have been poisoned.
But I wasn't.
But you weren't, so it was worth the risk in this case. Yeah.
But Martin, can you say that you've ever eaten a mince pie sponge cake before? Because I can't. And
no.
It does
mince pie sponge trifle cake.
Mince pie sponge trifle cake. Yeah, it does sound good.
Thank you.
Although we're
pleased to hear that. Yeah.
We are probably confusing a lot of our US listeners who are probably like, mince cake. What are they talking about? That sounds disgusting.
Don't they have mince pies in the US? Do they have those?
Oh, mince pies. Yeah, I think mince pies are a thing, aren't they? Yeah.
Are they a thing in the US? I thought that was like a uniquely British thing. I thought that was like one of those.
Trifle's British, right?
Trifle's very
mince pies
British.
are everywhere.
Oh, tell us in the comments below if you're an American listener or someone who's been to America and tried a mince pie or not. Please, are they a thing over there? Let us know.
I bet they're not.
Originated from Britain and was brought to New England by English settlers. Do mince pies exist? They exist, but aren't super common. Some restaurants have them. Restaurants? Mince pie in a restaurant?
mince pies?
That's the thing.
Exist, but they're not common.
That's the thing. I think if they do have them, I think it's going to be like this exotic delicacy from across the pond. It's not like
I don't think they're thinking that way.
It's not like it's not like something that is. I mean, I think they'll just be like, oh, those kooky British people eating mince pies. I'll be very surprised.
In Vermont. Yeah.
I'll be like, I mean, even people over here, a lot of people don't get the appeal of mince pies. So I kind of. I don't think it will have translated.
What's the equivalent? Let's ask that as well. What's your equivalent to a mince pie?
That's that's a good question. Well, it's like they've got pumpkin pie for like Thanksgiving, and that didn't really translate over here.
It's a bit sweet, then, isn't it? A bit sweet for a flan.
Pie's awful. Yeah.
Now we're just talking about desserts. Have we had dinner this evening? Are we hungry? Is that what's going on?
Oh, maybe that's it. So yeah.
Well, okay.
On a different note.
Oh no, sorry. No, Robin, go on. I was moving on, but go for it.
I was just going to derail things even further by saying bittersweet for me at the moment, because one of the biggest things that's happened in the past month is the sad announcement from the Super Show podcast.
Yes.
That they are wrapping up after 5 years of incredible, almost every week.
Oh, they're much better at it than us.
A couple of weeks that they've missed. Video game news and commentary. They've been absolutely fantastic, and I've loved them, and I'm going to miss them very much. That was a very sad day for me. And that was almost as sad as other recent events with a global consequence. But I think Super Show had a more impact on me emotionally. However, just to sweeten the pill of that, a blast from the past, I got recognized the other day by somebody.
Did you? What?
Yeah. If they're probably not listening, because but Claire and Scott, if you're out there, hello. They said, "Oh, did you used to do YouTube?" And I said, "Yes, I did." And they said, "Did you said a word, didn't you?" I was like, "Okay, yeah." So
I might have done.
So I said the word, and she's like, "Yeah, that's it." I was like, "Yeah, okay."
Oh, nice. What was the word? What was the word? Go and say it. Say the word.
Go on.
However,
that's
as good as it gets right now. But yeah,
you kept that one to yourself. Nice. You never mentioned that. Wow.
Was this in your hometown?
No, it was in this part of the country, but it was in the pub somewhere else.
Oh, okay.
And it was for your YouTube work. It wasn't for your OnlyFans. It was.
It was definitely for the YouTube.
Deadpan,
straight face. My OnlyFans does not. No. How's yours going?
It's paying the bills. It paid that light behind you, didn't it? Nice. He's not denying it. So
that's right. It's a little bit better than that, actually. Yeah. Anyway, before we get into the main topic, we are going to be discussing some of the things that we learned this week. So, Martin, I'm going to come to you first. What have you learned this week, or I should say, this past month? Really.
I learned that Robin ate a dessert made out of mince pies this week.
Honestly, I'll allow it because that is.
Oh.
No. No, what I did learn, I learned about Victor Morales, who was a teacher in Texas. And on a whim, well, I guess on a whim or a dare, his students at his school that he worked at said, "Oh, why don't you run as a Democratic nominee for Senate?"
Oh, yeah.
And he went, okay, why not? I'll give it a go. And he ran on the tagline, let me get this right, "Por qué no?" or "Why not?" based on him saying why not to his students. And he defeated his opponent, John Wiley Bryant, with 51% of the vote.
Wow.
And apparently he supposedly benefited because he had the same surname as Daniel Morales, who was another American politician who served as the Attorney General for Texas around that time. And people maybe got a little bit confused and voted him in. And he became the first minority candidate in Texas history to become a United States Senate nominee for either major party.
Huh.
And of course, he didn't have any staff. He only
Oh.
raised $15,000
Oh.
and didn't accept any kind of interest from private donors either, but got in.
That's great.
And he won a lot of the African American vote, over 79% of it, and a similar amount of the Latino vote. And really rejuvenated that community as a result. And then since then, various other minority candidates have got in as a result and taken his lead or followed in his footsteps.
Wow.
Yeah. So then he became a politician, and he lost political campaigns in the late 90s. But at the same time, he paved the way for others in his path.
That's amazing.
Can it happen nowadays?
Victor Morales.
Like, I wonder if the same thing could happen in the modern climate of like. But then, having said that, like you get cases of people running really successful like online campaigns and stuff, not using traditional like advertising and stuff, and still doing really well. So maybe.
I mean, this wasn't that. He's quite old. He's 75, but this wasn't that long ago. This was 1996 that this happened. Sorry, I should have mentioned the year. But yeah.
It's only 30 years ago. Wow.
Impressive. Oh, actually, it's quite a long time ago now, isn't it, really?
Well, yeah, I mean, you said only 30 years ago. I was like, what? It wasn't 30 years ago, was it? Wow. Crazy.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So if your kids in your class say, go on, run for it,
Are you listening?
Maybe do it.
Are you listening, Democrats? That's your campaign in 4 years' time. Just why not?
Yep. Why not? Por qué no? Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what Trump's whole campaign was, essentially.
Oh, yeah.
Why not me?
Exactly.
Anyway.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Martin. Robin, what have you learned this week?
I have learned a very fascinating fact about the Latin name of the chocolate tree.
What?
So chocolate comes from cocoa beans. Cacao beans. Cacao beans come from cocoa beans. Which one's which?
The cacao plant, which has
cacao plant has cocoa beans. Yes, you're right. Because the name of the tree that produces the beans is the Theobroma cacao, and that name means food of the gods.
Nice.
So there you go. That's my fact, because it's just true. One of those rare cases of science, botany, everything coming together. Like, yes, you accurately named that thing.
Also, Robin, I'm loving the continuation of the chocolate facts. That has not gone unnoticed.
Thank you very much.
Well done.
I try. What did you learn this week, Alex?
Well, let me ask you, and this is going to be great listening for the podcast listeners. What face am I doing?
Oh, yes, that's a scream.
Yeah, Edvard Munch.
It's the famous painting Edvard Munch's Scream, yes. And I learned a couple of facts about this one this week. First of all, did you know that it doesn't depict a person screaming, but rather someone reacting to hearing a scream?
Oh.
That's what it's depicting. So the scream does not come...
Screaming.
Well, the scream does not come from the figure, but from nature. But from the figure. It's channeling my Matt Berry there. But the scream comes from nature. The figure appears frightened and covers his ears to blur the deafening scream of nature.
Oh.
So it's actually...
That is really interesting.
It's actually covering his ears.
That's the kind of douchey fact I'll definitely repeat.
Yeah, I mean, genuinely, that's interesting. It's always fascinating to learn about the inspiration and the intention behind art, whether it's in painting, literature, or another medium. However, I do tend to think if you have to explain it, you've kind of missed the point. And I think that sounds like the artist is like, everyone's like, it's called The Scream. It looks like you painted someone screaming, and the artist is like, no, that's obviously not what it's about. And it's like, I think it is, Ed. I think it is.
Oh,
I mean, does art not be open? Can it not be open to interpretation? This isn't it impressionistic? Is it the impressionist style?
Oh, of course it is. But I feel like, if that's the artist saying this is what it's actually about, then it's not open to interpretation, is it? Huh?
Do you know what? Do you know what? Fair play.
In
Yeah.
which case, it's not art.
I guess no one in their right mind would look at that and go, I wonder if actually they were reacting to a scream.
Yeah.
Maybe it needs a bit more explaining. But yeah.
Or maybe that was his response to somebody, some run-of-the-mill milkman walks into the gallery, just like, if he's screaming, why is he covering his ears? And the Bob Monkey's like, actually, he's reacting to a scream. I was like, well, who's screaming? The painter? No, it is nature. Yes, nature is screaming. Yes. What does nature's scream sound like? That is for you to contemplate. Yes.
That's where the interpretation comes in.
I want an entire episode of just that dialogue with you doing both of those voices. I wasn't going to interrupt you, I was going to let that play out for as long as possible. See how...
Careful. If you have to interrupt me. I'll just go on these things these days. I've got no brain power these days to stop myself.
No, I loved it. I loved every second of it, Robin.
Very good.
The other thing I learned was that there is not one version of the Scream, but there's actually 5 versions. There's 3 paintings, a pastel, and a lithograph, which I think is like when they carve it out. So it's like a print, isn't it?
Right.
Version of it. So yeah.
What's the best one?
The famous one is the best one. Although the lithograph is actually
the one that costs the most money
got something
to
going
buy.
for it.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool. So, but they're all made by him, by Edvard Munch.
I assume so. Yeah.
Otherwise, I mean, if I did a Scream, it wouldn't really count as the 6th, would it?
True.
Yeah. There's probably more than 5 in that case, if that's not the case.
So they're actually kind of the Scream film franchise. Then has exceeded the original material.
Even better.
They're on Scream 7 now, so they've gone past it.
Yeah. They certainly earn more money, which in a capitalist society is,
that's true.
The important thing, isn't it?
Fellas, thank you for sharing with me what you've learned. Before we jump into the main topic, we should really give a massive, massive thank you to some of our Patreon supporters. And in particular, I'd like to thank Scott Joel, Amy Licious, Cindy Hafner, Rashad Najar, Caleb Wilkerson, Kurt Jones, John Baker, Janie, Henny Ruffle, The Super Show Podcast, Nicholas Dill, Emmett Tapier, Ahmad, Peasword, Josh Chomatek, A Filthy Casual, and the one and only Simon Workman. Thank you all so much. We appreciate it from the bottom of our hearts. We would not be here today if it weren't for you people. So thank you.
No, thank you.
And if you're just a casual listener of the podcast on YouTube or on the podcast platform of your choice, thank you as well for listening and supporting. And if you did want to like that video while you're down there, why not? Now,
exactly. We could go into the stats. Can we say, I have noticed that actually 78% of you aren't subscribed.
Oh, people, they do that, don't they?
Haven't rung the bell notification.
And
so we won't do that. But also,
but you kind of have though, Martin. Now you've said it.
I know, right? I know. Yeah, I'm in a bit of a conundrum here. Can't really win. Like and subscribe.
Share with friends.
Smash that like button. Hit the bell notification.
What's going to Martin? What's going to happen if they get 10,000 likes on this video?
Oh, I think you're going to run naked through the centre of York City, aren't you?
Of course, that was Martin's first thought. Of course, it was.
Of course, it was streaking.
Martin back again. It's like, I thought we'd move past this phase of life, Martin. I thought we'd move past it.
on a slightly adjacent note, it would be nice to create another featurette like we did in York.
Yes.
And honestly, that York one wouldn't have happened without the support from Patreon.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. And we want to do something similar this upcoming year. So firstly, thank you. And secondly, let's make it happen.
100%.
Yeah.
There you go. Just Interesting on tour.
Oh, yes.
2KT5. Let's do this.
Yeah. Tour. The book signing.
What book?
Exactly.
It's just a transcript of like all of the podcasts. So much talk about weather and mince pies.
You just read one page. Makes no sense whatsoever. None of this makes any sense.
Oh my gosh.
There you go. There you go. Okay. Shall we discuss the main topic of this week?
Yes, please.
So, gentlemen, if someone offered you a one-way ticket to Mars, okay, no, not a one-way, because
that's mental.
That's mental. A two-way, a return journey to Mars. But obviously, you know, there are risks involved, and it means being away from your family for like a year minimum.
Yeah.
But you would be the first person to set foot on the red planet. Would you go for it?
It's so boring, wouldn't it? Let's be honest.
It would be a bit boring.
The first 10 minutes would be great. I've been traveling for say it's a year, right? 6 months there, 6 months back. You get there and you'd be like, I can't believe you've made it. I mean, I'm 4 inches shorter than I was before, but I can't believe we made it. You get out, you'd be like, wow. Then you'd be like, there's no Netflix.
Yeah.
Actually, I hate to admit it, but yeah, I would struggle perhaps without internet on that 6-month journey. Now that I think about it,
Robin, you'd thrive. You can get all the movies that you want on a little USB.
I could
watch them for 6 months.
Yeah. 6 months.
Yeah, that'd be good.
It would make doing the podcast a bit of a struggle, I think, unless we're all on board.
We could do that, yeah. And then
it would do well, wouldn't it?
That would do well, yeah.
We could talk about anything. And it would do well.
Today, the gravity was a bit light, don't you think, lads? Hooray!
To be fair, yeah, it's true. There wouldn't be much to talk about.
I think it would be good.
The first episode would be great, with a huge drop off in episode 2 to the subsequent episodes.
But I think I would. I think I would accept that offer. Obviously, you know, setting aside other obligations in life on this planet, I think it would be, if someone came to me with that offer, it would be absolutely amazing. And in my head, of course, the spaceship that takes us to Mars is a lot like all the spaceships in the movies. And there's like a gym, and there's a rec room, and there's a cafeteria, and there's all this cool like bedding that comes out the walls and goes back in again.
You just want to be on Star Trek, don't you?
Basically. I would get on board like, so where's the holodeck? Going to be fun for the next 6 months, right? No, would you take it, Alex?
I think I would. Yeah. I mean, I would. I think. First of all, I would be concerned if someone offered it to me, because I'd be like, how many people have said no for you to get to me? But I mean, yeah, like if the plan was solid, if it was if it was NASA, if it was like, you know, they had a solid plan in place.
Yeah. What if Elon Musk himself made you the offer?
I mean, yeah, I would. Not if I was the first person. If it was him, yeah.
Yeah.
But look, we have identified the first problem with surviving on Mars, and that is getting there. There are a lot of challenges that we would still need to overcome in order to get to Mars. This isn't like going to the moon, which took, several days of travel, and they could get there in this small, tiny capsule. And yeah, they did have to, they faced some radiation from the Van Allen radiation belts on the way to the moon and back. But I mean, it was only a few days. So like it wasn't going to be, they were facing higher radiation levels, but it would be nothing compared to the trip to Mars and then surviving on the red planet. So in terms of travel time, with current propulsion systems like chemical rockets, you're looking at between 6 and 9 months on the ship.
One way.
One way to get to reach Mars. I think maybe a little bit sooner. But another thing to factor in is the fact, like, there are certain windows, depending on the year, of when it is a good time to go to Mars or not. You know, there's a Mars orbital injection window. And I think the next one's coming up in 2026. Because if you think about, like, the planets orbiting the sun, there are times when Mars is on the opposite side of the sun to us. And other times when it's kind of next to us, alongside us. You know, respectively.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
So,
And so that's the 69 months is kind of when it's close, I imagine.
yeah. So that's when it's feasible.
Oh, God.
And it could take several, like, it would be several years if it was elsewhere in the solar system.
Yeah.
So that means that any kind of human trip to Mars and back, you're going to need to bring at least a year's worth of supplies for every member of that crew. And more. Ideally, you'd have a bit of a backup in case, one of them decided to pack year out of date mince pies. It's fine. We'll turn it into a cake. So the amount of resources and the amount of, like you said, Robin, this couldn't just be like a tiny capsule that goes to the moon and back. They would need some sort of gym. They would need some sort of ability to sustain themselves for this long trip. And that includes psychological needs as well. Like you said, what would you do without the internet? What would you do without films and stuff? There has been interesting hurdles and experiments to try and overcome things like this. Wasn't there recently a scientific experiment where a bunch of quote-unquote astronauts, and I think I'm only saying that because they are technically trained astronauts, they just haven't been in space, but didn't they live in isolation in Hawaii for over a year?
Yes. Yes.
And I don't think we've had any, I mean, I don't know what the results would look like. They didn't kill each other, but they were kind of experimenting with what that duration of isolation in enclosed environments would do to a group of people.
Yeah. I think the Russians did something similar too. Sorry, Martin.
Oh no, go for it, Robin. Yours sounds much more interesting than I was going to say.
No, that was basically it. I think that's the Hawaii is the NASA one, and I think the Russians had something similar.
Okay.
The Russian one was 6 weeks inside a chamber that was approximating like the ISS, the shape and size of the ISS, or something like that.
Right.
I think.
Yeah.
Sorry, Martin, what were you going to say?
I was going to say it's not just the fact that you're in close proximity; it's the fact that there's nothing new to talk about. There's just nothing. You
can't even talk about the weather.
You're covering the same ground, aren't you?
Space weather.
Yeah,
that's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that. What do you talk? You'll need books. You'll need lots of books.
Yeah.
The magic of Kindle, I suppose. But you get up and you just like, oh, catch the game last night. What game? The ping pong that we played. The 0G ping pong that we played together. Did I catch it? Yes, I did.
I got. You were there. Yeah.
Sorry, man. I was having an out of body experience. It's like I was watching us play. What's going on?
But I mean, things like that. I think it's pretty reasonable to suggest. Yeah, humans can overcome that. We'll find a way. We'll entertain ourselves somehow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, the ones who want to go to Mars are the ones who are predisposed to overcome those challenges.
They'll have things to talk about. They'll be planning what they're going to say when they, what are their Neil Armstrong words going to say when they get onto the red planet.
Yeah. True.
But there are things about the trip that we don't know how we're going to deal with yet. We have some solid proposals. We have solid ideas, but things like microgravity effects, that kind of prolonged exposure to microgravity causes muscle atrophy, bone density loss. We don't know what the long-term effects of that really would be. So, I mean, there are interesting proposals with that. There's the idea of spinning the ship, whatever ship is going, to kind of create a 2001 style centrifugal force style of microgravity, artificial gravity. Yeah. So that's interesting. But I mean, we have to address it in terms of what ship is going to take humans to Mars. The most realistic ship at the moment in 2024 to take humans to Mars kind of looks like it's Elon Musk's Starship, or SpaceX's Starship, I should say. That is the only kind of proposal on the horizon from any company, really. Except for, do you remember, what was the thing that was going to send humans to Mars, and it was going to be a one-way trip, and it was a reality, reality TV show.
Yeah, was it like
Mars One or something?
Pepsi? It wasn't Pepsi, was it?
I think it was Mars One. Yeah,
was it Mars One?
That was. such a scam.
Oh, it was a
It's
scam,
not-
absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow, I've forgotten all about that. My problem with the Starship, obviously, I have a soft spot for SpaceX and Tesla, despite their owner. But I look at the Starship, I was like, I don't want to climb in that. It is so much like a phallus. It is clearly somebody compensating for something. I just don't want to get in that thing.
Yes.
Fair.
No, true.
Fair enough.
True.
But I mean, it is the thing that is actively addressing a lot of the concerns that will be needed. So, for instance, they have never done ship to ship fuel transfer in space before. And that is something that humans will need to be able to do, because we need to get more fuel into a spaceship in order to send all these supplies and humans off to Mars. And that is something that I think they're going to be testing. Actually, I think in their most recent... Oh, no, it wasn't in the most recent one. That was relighting an engine in orbit. But, I mean, I think next year they're going to be testing that. So that is going to be
the explosion.
Yes, so that is going to be interesting to watch either way. But yeah, just getting to Mars is a massive challenge. But then you get to Mars, and then, okay, so you've got to survive Martian radiation. And that's going to be a big problem as well. Cosmic
and
radiation.
The Martians themselves as well, right?
And the Martians themselves.
Yeah.
So Mars lacks a
We
magnetic...
haven't really talked about that yet. Thought I'd bring it up.
Do you remember the conspiracy theory with Obama went on a teleporter to Mars to be a diplomat for the humans with the Martians?
Wow.
Do you remember that?
Yep.
I missed that one.
Oof.
That was a conspiracy
I've blocked
theory
that one
from a few years back. Anyway, that just made me think of that for some reason. But when we get to Mars, Mars lacks a magnetosphere. So anyone on the surface is going to be exposed to dangerous cosmic rays. Sudden solar flares will cause like acute radiation sickness to anyone on the surface. And this is just over time, radiation increases cancer risks, damages cells, and impairs nervous systems. So humans aren't built for Mars's atmosphere, basically.
Yeah.
We've got some statistics to back this up if you're interested, just to give people an impression of the scale of the radiation problem. So you may remember the Mars Odyssey probe,
Yes.
which was
Rings a
some
bell.
years ago. NASA, back in 2001, I want to say, went to Mars, was exposed to 18 months of radiation, and measured, on average, that radiation on the Martian surface was 2.5 times higher than what astronauts experience on the International Space Station. To put it into some hard, granular figures, apparently human beings are exposed to, on average, on Earth, 0.62 rads of radiation per year. So rad is the measurement for radiation.
0.62, okay.
0.62. And apparently the human body can withstand up to 200 rads without permanent damage, which sounds kind of impressive. But out there, according to the Mars Odyssey measurements, you get an average of 22 millirads per day.
Wow.
Or 8 rads a year. So 8 rads a year compared to 0.62 rads per year on Earth.
That's a lot.
And that excludes solar flares, because every time, again, like you said, the Earth's magnetosphere deflects a lot of the sun's rays. So when there's a solar flare, and you may remember some of the headlines in the news in recent years, that can cause problems on Earth. But every time there's a solar flare reaching out towards Mars, it just gets the full force of it. So apparently, Mars Odyssey measured 2 solar proton events where radiation levels peaked at 2,000 millirads in a day.
Oh, that doesn't sound so good.
Yikes.
Yeah, and other smaller events that were 100 millirads a day. So that's just an impression of how radiation is like a number one concern.
Yeah.
Definitely. I think if humans got to Mars, that is going to be one of the top concerns. Surviving on the Martian surface, especially if you're going there to colonize Mars for the long term, and to make a self-sustaining economy. Colony, not economy.
Capitalist Alex
Capitalism.
just immediately thinks about
I'm going to
Muscular.
I'm going to the one place that hasn't been corrupted by capitalism. So what options are there for radiation shielding? NASA's testing quite a lot of materials like hydrogen-rich plastics, like polyethylene, and water-based barriers. So using water. Water is very radiation absorbent. And this is another thing that they're testing for the journey itself. Think about all the water that they need to take on a ship to Mars. Placing it strategically on the outside, well, not on the outside of the ship, but like in between the outside and maybe like the sleeping quarters. So where the crewmates are spending most of their time, like surrounding them is a body of water.
Bit like one of those
that is
cups
kind of
with
like
glitter in it.
Exactly, yeah. That is kind of blocking or absorbing a lot of the radiation. So that's an interesting idea.
I like it. Let's do it.
The other option is designing habitats using the Martian soil, the regolith. So you would send robots to 3D print these habitats for humans using the soil itself. And it's
is that sorry carry on.
I was just going to say layers of Martian soil could reduce radiation exposure by up to 75%. So
is that just because you've built a structure that's able to block it? It's nothing to do with the soil itself.
No, it is to do with the soil itself. It's rich with like the certain kind of chemical compounds that is able to absorb and reflect the radiation.
Interesting.
Cool. I wonder, do you think so? What they would send robots that would excavate, robots that would then feed it into these giant printing machine robots that would, so it'd be several different robots doing different purposes being sent to do this.
I mean, there's different proposals. There's one where it's like printing 3D blocks and building surfaces out of this regolith on the surface, or there's ideas to, tunnel and bore into the ground and then inflate a structure under the ground. So it would be a fully underground base, essentially.
That's mad, isn't it? Imagine like even 30 years ago saying, let's send robots to Mars to 3D print a structure.
Yeah.
So what?
And what they haven't thought of is presumably those robots will have to have some kind of artificial intelligence, narrow at the very least, in order to do their job.
Yeah.
What if they become sentient and develop their own society, and then they have some kind of class war where the robots who do the digging revolt against the robots who do the printing, who are just like, feed me because I'm building the structure that humanity needs, and the ones are like, but we do all the digging.
Hold on, is this The Bug's Life?
Robin, are you doing the movie The Bug's Life again? You're wondering what you would talk about on the journey to Mars. You would drive the other crewmates insane. They'd be like, "Oh, Robin, do you have a good sleep?" And you'll be like, "How do we know that these robots are building structures for us and they're not? There's not a robot uprising when we
I
get
would
there."
be the crew member who goes insane. It's like,
lock him in the
Robin's
brig.
got the scissors and he's smashing the robots.
He's got that space
robots.
madness.
He keeps on shouting, "Forget the ants! It's the time of the grasshoppers."
Oh,
there's also going back to the radiation thing. I remember reading an article some years back, which I found very inspiring because I'm a big fan of fungi, and apparently Chernobyl is really useful or really interesting for the plant life that has grown there, because the place is so irradiated, it's completely inhospitable to most animals and certainly all humans. You would die. But plants have reclaimed Chernobyl, and apparently there's a fungus which grows really prosperously there, which eats radiation essentially.
It's pretty mad, isn't it?
Yeah.
It doesn't take long, does it?
Nature is incredible. Yeah. So I remember reading, it was an article, I think they were looking into maybe a kind of fungal layer on the outside of spaceships might help.
I remember you've spoken about this before, actually.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it might have even been a few years ago now, but I remember that. It stands out, yeah.
That's really fascinating. Yeah, no, that's cool. So there are a number of options that humans can look at for these challenges. Humans. So next on the list that we will have to contend with is literally breathing an atmosphere and accessing water as well. some of the key components of life. So Mars's thin atmosphere, which is 100 times less dense than Earth's, and its composition is made up of 95% carbon dioxide, which obviously makes it uninhabitable for humans. NASA's Mars rover, Perseverance, has a instrument on it called the MOXIE instrument, which was designed to successfully extract small amounts of oxygen from carbon dioxide. Current yields are very small, 6 grams per hour, but scaling this experiment up, maybe this could provide breathable air and oxidizer for fuel as well.
6 grams of air. I mean, that doesn't sound like it.
It doesn't sound good.
But it sounds like they have to do quite a lot of scaling to get that to a place where it could be used.
I think enough time though.
I think maybe a more realistic option could be some hydroponics-based system using like plants.
Whoa, that's a fancy word. What's hydroponics?
Well, don't put me on the spot like that. Isn't it just like isn't it just like growing plants indoors? Is that it?
Okay.
That's all I thought it was. I thought it was just growing plants indoors. Leave me alone, Robert.
Sorry.
But, I mean, plant. Yeah, I think I'm imagining we might come on to it, but growing plants has to be. If you're growing plants for your oxygen, that's a riskier business. But then I guess if you're growing plants for food, that's a risky business too, because you're 6 months away from home. Yeah. So, so are there any tactics or tips to grow plants that we know of?
Well, I think actually there is some feasibility in growing plants in Martian soil. I think from some tests they have said that it would be kind of feasible to grow some on Martian soil, but it does lack nutrients, obviously, of Earth soil, so it would need... But I mean, humans do bring fertilizer with them as well, in the form of their own feces. Yeah. So there's a lot that people can reuse when they are bringing...
And whichever crew members don't survive.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, yes.
Each one of the crew that dies provides survival material for the ones who survive.
Very giving. I like it. Yeah. Selfless.
So what you take do you store your feces on the journey, the 6 months journey over?
In a bag.
To then use for fertilization.
Absolutely. In fact, I think everything would get reused. No one's going to be shooting poops out into space. This is everything would be used on the trip. And I think that's another thing with like water as well. Recycling systems like those on the ISS. Advanced water reclamation systems recycle up to 90% of all the water that's used. From urine, sweat, waste, everything kind of goes through this cycle. So 90% of it gets to be reused.
Are they wearing still suits?
That's a nice way of putting it.
From Dune? This is Dune, right? They just need to still suits and walk around in those on Mars.
But they don't even need to. They don't even need to wear the suits. It's just happening all around them because they're not walking around in their clothes, just in plain clothes on Mars. It's where in their living quarters and stuff. That's where all of this reclamation would be happening and ongoing on a daily basis.
Like the tent they have in Dune. It's Dune. I'm still bringing that back to Dune. That's what I'm trying to do here.
Fair play.
But so wait. What? Actually, that's a good question. What would they wear on Mars?
Spacesuits.
All the time.
All specific proper anti-radiation.
Well, yeah, I think so. You've got the radiation to deal with. You've got presumably the temperature. It's going to be you're going to be exposed, very exposed to the elements, right? Wherever you set up on Mars, it's either going to be very cold or very hot, depending on. Presumably colder because it's further away from the sun than the Earth. And particularly if you go to where the water is most prevalent, which would be the polar regions, you probably be very cold all the time. So would everyone just get the same bog standard, space uniforms, or would they get the option to, take their fur coat if they've got a fur coat? Yes, you can take your Serbian mink with you because actually you will need it.
I mean, I think that's actually a really good question. What are the kind of thermal properties of like a spacesuit? Like how warm does it keep you? I know that sounds weird. You kind of imagine that it wouldn't be affected by temperature, but of course it would be. Like, do you know what I mean? Like you would imagine it would just keep things like that outside. But of course, whatever spacesuit they have, like the ones that took humans to the moon, I'm sure would have their own kind of internal heating system or cooling system. definitely a heating system in this case.
Yes.
So the average
And
temperature on Mars is about minus 60. So very cold, but like, you know, that's kind of the temperature on, like, if you're going polar exploring or something, isn't it? Around minus 60.
It can get pretty cold.
Yeah, and loads of people do that.
Loads of people do that. So no one gets frostbitten. It's fine.
But there's a good point, actually. Humans can definitely survive in the Arctic and the Antarctic. So
yeah. So we kind of mentioned it. Food production would also be a big problem. If anyone's seen The Martian, that is kind of a not too unrealistic look at, like, food production. You know, growing potatoes and veg. It presents interesting challenges. What would the diet consist of? Would people be reliant on food from Earth being sent in supplies? Is there any kind of way that it could be self-reliant and self-sufficient? I mean, NASA has successfully grown crops like lettuce in hydroponic systems under simulated Martian conditions. So it's believed like it would be possible, but I guess you don't know until you test it extensively.
I mean, I like lettuce, but it's not exactly the most most persuasive sailing argument. You're like, come to Mars,
lettuce.
You can have lettuce.
You can have lettuce, and all you need to do is recycle your sweat to be able to water it.
Just keep all your poo and your sweat, and you'll be
able to lettuce. Yeah.
There is also some experiments going on in what's called perchlorate removal, which is microbial bioremediation, which is detoxifying Martian soil, making it suitable for agriculture. And there have been some experiments on Earth to simulate this that has shown some promise in degrading perchlorates in the Martian soil. So it's possible to detoxify it, basically.
Honestly, I can't help but think that the way the world is going, right? We're talking about an inhospitable planet here, aren't we? Ultimately.
Oh, yeah.
Surely we can use a lot of these technologies here on Earth to make things better.
It's an interesting point.
Well,
it's like probably in every scenario more hospitable.
Imminent famines and kind of exhausted farmland.
Was it irrigation?
Well, there are obviously other challenges as well, but I think we've covered the main ones. But I mean, on top of this, if you did have a self-sustaining colony, then you've got to get into the issue of governance and ethics and all that, and like laws and everything. You know, but because you brought it up, Martin, let's ask the question, the big question. Ultimately, what this has been leading to: is this worth it?
Is it worth the risk?
Should we be going to Mars? We've said, like, okay, there are lots of challenges. However, all of them are being worked on. Humans could overcome most of them, maybe all of them, possibly. But should we? Should we be bothering? Or should we be spending all of these resources on Earth? Things we can do on Earth. Discuss.
I'm going to go out there and say something that maybe will annoy everybody, which is to say that more strongly than ever before in my life, given the person who is most adamant about going to Mars, I'm actually more persuaded than ever that governments should be putting the resources into space exploration simply to keep it out of the hands of people who we really don't want to be the ones determining the future of humanity outside of this planet. I mean, history tells us, you know, when you leave it to private enterprise to push the frontiers of exploration and colonization, things tend to not go very well for a lot of other people, the ones who don't have the wealth, who don't have the resources. So you say, do you want...
Whereas government-led colonization has always been a massive success.
Of course. No, that's a very good point. That's a very good counterpoint. But given the nature of this as a very long-term prospect, it's not a quick and easy fix-it thing.
Yeah.
The fact that we're now in a position where probably the front runner to go to Mars to set up a colony is Elon Musk, and we know he definitely wants to go there himself. I genuinely tremble at the thought of him being responsible for, as you say, the ethics and politics of the very first Martian colony, as well as the control over it in terms of, he'll have a monopoly on Martian resources, which he definitely will exploit. And I feel like what you need is that NASA type organization, which is thinking generationally, which is thinking outside of themselves to say, we are scientists, we're curious, we're developing this technology, which in our lifetime we won't get to use. But in 20 years' time, 30 years' time, some lucky astronaut on this same program will get to use it. And because the government, which recycles every few years, is the ones funding it, the taxpayers are, that's actually a good thing, I think, rather than the risk of what we do have, which is privatized space exploration, which undeniably history tells us, if we're going to learn from history, that that kind of thing is rapid. Privatized industrial processes and exploration and colonization do expand very quickly, but the costs of that and the long-term damage of that is not worth the risk, in my opinion. So in terms of on a kind of macro humanitarian view, I think it's not worth it unless we can guarantee it's a public enterprise and not a private enterprise.
Okay.
I think
fair enough.
I guess the devil's advocate there would be that a combination of public and private enterprise historically has driven innovation, right? And not just innovation in terms of technologies to colonize Mars, but back to the question of what we're doing on Earth. Like, can we use the advancement of a lot of these technologies on Earth to help us actually protect the planet that we do have? So I think what could come out of this could be technologies that help with our existing problems that we're going through. Yes, Mars might be the pipe dream, but actually the innovation and the resources put towards this can actually help us in our current pretty terrible situation.
I think I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Martin, because I think like actually going to Mars and trying to colonize it is absurd. It's insane. Why would we do that? Like it's a barren rock. There is nothing that we could do to this planet that we live on now to make it less inhabitable than Mars, really. Even like a full-scale nuclear war broke out, whatever remnants left would still be more habitable than Mars. So if we nailed all of these things on the list and were like had all the technology ready to go to have a self-sufficient Martian colony, like technology-wise, then that means that yes, we could use that here on Earth as well. And I think that is definitely a worthwhile pursuit. Even if I would say I'd go further and in disagreeing with you, Robin, and say even if the worst dregs of humanity are the ones pushing this technology forward, it's definitely worthwhile, I think.
I mean, the way that Musk fanboys flock around him, I do fear that a lot of people will look at the Earth and say, well, Elon Musk is going to get us to Mars anyway, and we will have another planet regardless. You know, screw the Earth for future generations. What's the point? There's plenty that we can do. You know, in 100 years' time, we'll all be living on Mars. It'll be fine. And then, as a result, there's the planet that we do have is kind of again pushed to the side.
That is a worrying.
That's a real
kind of attitude shift when we have a spare planet.
We'll be fine.
I mean,
I think Elon Musk actually encourages that, doesn't he? Really, in a big way. There's a lot of the implied. That's the word I'm looking for. Kind of recklessness in behaviors encouraged by him, because he's always just like, it's fine, I've got electric vehicles and we're going to Mars, so I've saved the planet. And that's kind of his big thing. And I think, you're right. He must encourage a lot of bad behavior as a result of that.
I mean, I could be wrong, but I think that by the time that there is a spare planet, actually, like the time that we can actually talk about this, when there's a self-sufficient colony on Mars, is going to be way past the time that Elon Musk has moved on from this world, and probably us as well. But no, I think that
will there be humans who can be bothered, who have the resources and the means to go to Mars? The planet might be so screwed.
Yeah. So I guess finally then, do we think that it's going to happen? Will we see humans land on Mars in our lifetime?
Will we?
Yeah,
like us.
Yeah.
No, very iffy.
I think if we like, we're all relatively young and we're all relatively healthy. I think we'll probably live long enough to see people land on Mars. I don't know how old I will be when that happens, but I think it will happen in our lifetime. What I do also think, however, and the big thing that nobody's talking about, and I don't mean this in a jokey way, I mean this in a serious way. 100%. If this all goes well, Alex, everything you just described, and we get to Mars, people set up a colony, the structures hold, they protect them from the radiation, they manage to start terraforming in the successful ways they can grow crops.
We didn't even talk about terraforming. Sorry, yeah.
We didn't, yeah. Well, we kind of did. We talked about oxygenation through plants and stuff like that. So if that all goes really well, 100%, they're going to release or encourage the evolution of some new form of plague or bacterium that just wipes out everything within a generation or two. Like, it's like the settlers in the New World, Jamestown or Roanoke or whatever. Just something like that is going to happen to the first people to go to Mars, and then no one's talking about that because everyone's like, "Oh, Robin, you're such a conspiracy theorist." I'm like, no, it's going to happen because it's a strange planet. It's got its own historical germs. We're pretty sure that they're buried there somewhere in the ice, and if not them, then your own germs you bring with you will evolve into like big dog things that eat you. I don't know about that bit, but you get the gist. So that's, I think, we'll see people on Mars within our lifetime, but whether we live to see the inevitable destruction of the first colony, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of historical precedent for that, isn't there? Like you said, with Roanoke and everything, like initial colonies being sent, they don't often have a huge success rate.
They do not.
Yes, no, I think you're right though. But interesting nonetheless.
Up in the air on whether we'll see it in our lifetime. Got to be honest. I think there'll be probably serious hurdles to overcome, especially with protecting people long term from radiation.
Yeah.
If you mentioned the issues, with the solar flares and when Mars is closer to the sun, all this kind of stuff being 2000 as opposed to 0.6. I think that's going to be quite a big hurdle to overcome if people are there for the long term. If you went to Mars, stayed for a little bit and then came back, but actually establishing a colony for long term staying, there's a lot of factors to overcome. We will see, but I think 50-50. Depends how long I live, really. Yeah.
If you were given the responsibility of naming the first colony on Mars, what would you call it?
Probably Martin. It works. It works.
You had the perfect opportunity to do some viral marketing for the Just Interesting podcast, and you failed completely.
Apologies.
You can't buy that kind of marketing. The first ever Martian colony. You could have called it the Just Interesting Colony. And
Martin Land.
Martin Land. Go on, Robin.
Martin Land for short.
What's yours? What would you call it?
Honestly, I hadn't thought of it, but New Virginia. I don't know. Just New South Wales. That's what I'll call it.
Fair enough.
What would you call it, Alex? Just interesting? Is that what you go for?
Yeah, I'd stick with that.
Just interesting.
New Just Interesting, yeah.
New Just Interesting.
Smash that like button.
The suburbs, that's it. You get the suburbs, which is smash that like button, share and subscribe.
Yeah.
Comment terrible. Below. An influencer colony.
What's your address? 5 Mars Road, notification button, Avenue. Nice. Well, thank you guys for indulging me in that discussion. It's interesting. Who knows whether we'll see any of this in our lifetime, but it's interesting that all of this is being worked on. Let us know in the comments. What do you think? Do you think that this technology is worth pursuing? Do you think that this is a worthwhile endeavor for humans to be actively seeking out? Or do you think that our time would be better spent elsewhere? Let us know in the comments down below. And speaking of comments, we wanted to address some of the comments that have been left for us in the last week. No, I'm lying. In the last several weeks. Guys, did you have any comments that you wanted to read out?
Yeah, mine's not really relevant to anything, but on our episode, 150, our special, live special, where we discussed the weirdest conspiracy theories, both ones that we brought to the table and that I think our audience prompted us and asked us about in the chat, the live chat. Gemma Manning 3518 just a few days ago commented, "The world is not enough is awesome." And that makes me smile in so many ways, partly because,
awesome.
I don't remember us discussing The World Is Not Enough, the James Bond film with Pierce Brosnan, but we clearly did. And the second thing is, weirdly coincidentally, just the other day, in fact, I think 3 days ago, which is when this comment was posted, I was thinking about The World Is Not Enough and watching some clips from it, just in the kind of nostalgic.
That is weird. That's weird that when that happens, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not.
Unless Gemma Manning has hacked your YouTube account and can see your watch history.
That's scary.
I guess there's a few iconic scenes from that one, isn't there? At the beginning with the Millennium Dome, isn't there?
There is.
The river. That's pretty iconic.
I'd like to thank Gemma Manning. Thank you so much for bringing up James Bond and getting Martin and Robin to talk about James Bond again on this podcast.
I knew it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Who's your favourite Bond villain, Alex?
I like Le Chiffre. Is it Le Chiffre? The one with his eyes bleeding.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
His tell at poker is that his eyes bleed, and he's really good.
It's not great, is it? How's he good at poker? Yeah.
But yeah, no, a bit of Mads Mikkelsen, but also that's the only James Bond film I can remember. Really,
that's a good one.
Except for Die Another Day. Yeah. That was the first one I watched. First one, best one. There you go.
Oh no.
Goodness me, although still in that one, although it's one of the worst, let's just be fair to it. There are still some set pieces that are quite iconic. There's of course the chase on the ice. Was the Jaguar XKR? I think it is the green one.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah. There's that bit with the rocket. Yeah, that's cool. An invisible car. And then there's the fencing, I guess, which is something.
That's a great scene. That's fun.
Yeah. Well, they're not really fencing, are they? They're not really fencing. They're just attacking each other with swords.
Yeah.
That's true. Die Another Day is unforgettable. It's got many aspects to it, which you just don't forget. The thing that gets me about Die Another Day, and this we can talk about this in more detail another time. Just summary of Die. My summary of Die Another Day is: I find in some ways Die Another Day fascinating because it's one of those films where you watch it, and when you know how much effort and time goes into making films, you're just like, did they spend every single day at work on this ginormous production and nobody thought this was going badly? Like nobody thought, are we making a terrible film?
Yeah.
What comments did you get, guys?
Yeah, that's what we were doing.
Go for
I just closed my window.
Oh, okay.
Mistake.
Well, kind of relevant. I had a comment from Blur19444 who says, not sure if this has been brought up or not, but are you guys into fantasy or sci-fi books? If so, do you have any good or interesting reads that you could recommend? Also, love the podcast and all that you three do to keep me going through tough times. Oh,
that's very kind.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry we haven't been there for the past month, but that's a really lovely comment.
And I hope you're not going through tough times at the moment. I hope your times are looking good. But interested in fantasy or sci-fi books? Well, I mean, I think I in terms of sci-fi books, I don't read a huge amount, but I did really like The Martian, funnily enough, by Andy Weir. That's actually really good. I was one of those people that, and I generally get annoyed when people are like this because it's like, but I was one of those classic. I read the book first, then watched the film, and then didn't like the film.
Of course, yeah.
When actually, I think a lot of the people that did read the book actually didn't mind the film. I think it was most people consider it to be a pretty faithful adaptation, but but yeah, no, the book is way better than the film.
Okay.
Yeah. So, how about you guys?
I already mentioned it. Dune, I guess. Yeah.
Dune, nice. I don't really read too much sci-fi.
Oh, actually,
fantasy. I haven't really read much fantasy since like Harry Potter and Narnia and stuff. Like not a huge amount of like adult fantasy, like
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But yeah, I do like fantasy genre TV shows and sci-fi TV. I mentioned the Alien.
You were doing an Alien watch.
I haven't got any further actually. I haven't got on to some of which one I've got, a couple of the new ones to do.
Do you know what I'd like to see you do, Martin? I'd like to see you play Alien Isolation on Twitch.
I'll do that.
That's what I would love to see.
Yeah, do that. Yeah.
Because I'm too scared to play it, but I would love to watch you play it.
Likewise.
Another one I would
happily do that.
Another one I would add while I think of it is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and those books.
Those
are like some of my favorite books. I love those books. I
read a lot of Terry Pratchett growing up when it comes to fantasy. But the only ones, and I still own a few, but the only ones I owned are the Rincewind books, the ones about the useless wizard. Those ones spoke to me.
I've never read those. So.
No,
worth it. Worth it. Don't read too many in a go, though. I find it's quite grating. His style is so sarcastic. It's kind of it gets a bit much after a while. How about Neil Gaiman, who's Mr. Popular right now?
Everyone can't really recommend him. Oh, Neil.
Neil.
How about you, Martin?
I have a Yes, I have a comment from where is it gone? Here it is. From Real Cap, and they say, "I'm fine with Christmas stuff going up the week of Black Friday in the US." Now, is that too early? The week of Black Friday.
Is that this week?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not too early. That's like the last week of November, is it?
Yeah. Is before December okay? I mean, I can't talk about this. I mean, I've had Christmas songs going for the last couple of weeks. The kids are into this song from the 1950s that goes, "I want a hippopotamus for Christmas."
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And they've heard it. They've heard it on a compilation. And now whenever we're in the car, they ask for it to and from school.
Oh, lovely. Nice.
So I've listened to that a good few dozen times now in the last week and a bit.
And the thing is with kids of that age, you're going to be hearing that after Christmas as well. It's not going to stop because Christmas is over.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
This is my life now. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I blame my wife because we went to a garden centre to look at the Christmas decorations. They've got this incredible model village that honestly is about 7 or 8 meters long. Model village of merry-go-rounds and shops and all sorts. It's incredible, all Christmas themed. It's amazing. It's worth going to the garden centre, to just see that and the Christmas lights and stuff. Yeah. And my wife in the car said, "Yeah, no, we're going to this. We're going to the Christmas lights, watching this. We've got to. I know it's only mid-November, but we've got to listen to Christmas songs." And that one came on during that. So the blame is squarely at her feet. But anyway,
when you mention Model Village, all I can think of is Hot Fuzz.
Oh yeah.
Timothy Dalton impaled on a spike. Spoilers.
Spoilers for 20-year-old. Oh, Hot Fuzz is so good.
That's a good film. So good. Yeah.
If anyone who hasn't, I'm sure most of our audience have seen it, but if anyone hasn't seen that, for the love of God, watch Hot Fuzz. It's so good. It's one of my favorite films.
Yeah, I'd say the same. Definitely in the top 5 for me. Yeah, nice. Well, thank you guys on that Hot Fuzz recommendation note. Thanks for indulging me in this discussion about Mars and technology. And thank you at home for listening to this. We hope you enjoyed it. And nothing else really to say. Is there? Is there anything else to say?
I don't think so.
Have a fantastic week. And I'm sure you will see us before Christmas.
Happy New Year.
You
will. Thank you guys so much for bearing with us, and we will see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.